Let's talk about the rhetorical modes of definition and comparison contrast. A definition essay offers the writer's explanation on a word or a term. Both concrete words and terms, such as degree or financial aid, and abstract words, such as success or honor, can be defined in an essay. The essay starts by offering a general definition, and then it moves into the writer's personal views or experience with the word. A definition essay on success might begin by discussing the idea of an accomplishment of a goal, and then move into a specific story of when the writer achieved success in his or her life. Definition combined with narrative is a very powerful rhetorical mode. So I've given you a few video examples of definition. Notice how different they are. We all have different ways of defining terms for ourselves, such as success. Success for me might be getting out of bed on time. Success for you might be making $1 million before breakfast. Success is different for everyone, and I want you to notice that. Definition essays can be very different and very interesting. A comparison contrast essay looks at the similarities or differences between two or more subjects. You can write an essay detailing the similarities of things, which is a comparison, or you can write about the differences between things, and you're looking at contrast. You can also write a combination of both. The idea of comparison contrast may be used to introduce an argument as well. Pre-writing about the things you are writing about will help you hone the purpose of the essay. So I want you to watch these 4 clips. Now, these are 4 short clips of different television shows that I thought may be kind of interesting to look at. And I want you to make a list, okay, of how we can turn these episodes into what might possibly be a very intelligent comparison contrast essay about television. Let's go to the board. Okay, so you can see I've done this nice chart here. All right, and you see I have Friends 2nd season, Friends the 6th season, West Wing, and Carol Burnett. Okay, I've listed the 4 clips that I asked you to watch. But then I started to ask myself a series of questions, which is what you would do with pre-writing. And the first thing I wanted to think of was, well, what type of shows were these? Okay, and so the first question I asked myself is type. And I look, both for the Friends are sitcom. Friends never changed, it was always a situation comedy. Then we have West Wing, which was a drama. And then we have the Carol Burnett show, which was a variety show. Now I will tell you, in case you don't know what a variety show is, that the clearest examples I think that are more modern would be Saturday Night Live or possibly the old In Living Color show. So those were variety shows. So you get the idea of what the Carol Burnett show was trying to do. Well, the next thing we might want to talk about in terms of what are we going to write about in this comparison contrast essay is when were those shows on the air? All right, good question. And so we have to go to our handy dandy research brain, and we see that Friends was on. It started in 1994 and ended in 2004, so it was on the air for 10 years. West Wing was on the air for 7 years. It started in 1999 and ended in 2006. And then we see Carol Burnett started in 1967 and ended in 1978. She was on the air for 12 seasons. Now, notice something. I have a show from 1967 and one from 1999. That's 32 years of television history, and television changes. So now we have something we might really be able to compare and contrast. So let's go look. The humor. Where does the humor come from in these episodes? Well, with Friends, we see that the humor comes from the jokes. Okay, it's the things that the characters say that are funny. Those were written. Those were scripted for those characters. The actors didn't just come into work one day and start making stuff up. Things were written. Okay, and then you get to West Wing. Now, here's a little bit of a difference. In this particular clip, the actress really is the one that makes the clip funny. The script probably said something along the lines of, and she laughs hysterically and is out of control. Okay? So this woman, Allison Janney, who was the actress that played CJ in West Wing, she would have had to make this a funny scene with her laughter. So she had to come up with that. So in this case, the laughter is what made this a funny scene. After all, remember that West Wing is a drama. It's not supposed to be non-stop humor. Okay? It's a drama. But, and we'll see why in just a minute, sometimes you do inject a little humor into dramas. So, and then we get to the Carol Burnett show. Now I will tell you that this particular clip that I asked you to watch was an ad-lib situation. Much of this did not make it on the air. Tim Conway, who is like the genius of ad-libs, he's the one that plays the crazy little man that talks about the elephants. This is the reason why it was funny. It's because of Tim Conway and the things that he was doing. Okay, so let's go back. Let's take a look at something else. All right, what is the setup for the show? Okay, obviously the shows are all different. First of all, of course, we have Friends, season 2 and season 6. They had the same 6 characters, the same 3 men, the same 3 women. All right, and it went like that for 10 years. However, something you might be able to talk about, say for example in a creative writing course, is the fact that these characters developed over a period of time. You'll notice that in the very beginning of the season Friends, of the show Friends, you'll see that Monica is not quite as neurotic or quite as crazy about her house as she is in season 6. In season 2 clip that you saw, Ross runs over and jumps on the couch. As the show developed over the years, there would be no way that Monica would have ever allowed that. So we see that as the show progressed, they began to give the characters more and more detail and more motivation and things that we could laugh at. All right? So what about West Wing? Well, West Wing had approximately 8 main characters. Some of them stayed, some of them left. For example, the character that was played, the character that was Sam on West Wing, played by Rob Lowe, this character left after, I think, 4 seasons. I think he left in the middle of season 4. He was an important character, and he left. So the characters change, okay? So what you could get out of this, if you're again writing for a creative writing class, is how did the characters change? How did they adapt after this main character left? Well, they brought in a new character to assume that position, but they had to make him different than the character Sam. So we could talk about that. But something else that you might be able to get from this idea is if you're looking at literature. How does literature change when a major character changes in the book or the novel or the short story that you're reading? Okay? Now, let's look at Carol Burnett. Where do we get the humor? Or where is the setup here? The setup is that there's sketches. Now, interestingly, in Carol Burnett, there were characters that did sketches every so often. This particular group is called Mama's Family. And it's based on a Southern family that does not get along, and the mother's real snippy and the daughter's kind of stupid. You know, Eunice is kind of just a strange, odd woman. But the sketches were all different. Now, usually there were 4 or less characters. Because they were sketches and they were short, they couldn't have a lot of characters, so they had to make it quick. So you could look at what happened to sketch comedy when you have 6 characters. Or can you even compare sketch comedy to something that's scripted? Well, the sketches were all scripted. But as we saw with this particular sketch with Tim Conway, it got a little out of hand. The script got a little out of hand, and he wandered very far away from what was actually supposed to be happening on the scene. So then let's take a look. We always want to look at setting. All right, so setting, New York City for Friends. Washington, D.C. was the setting for West Wing. And then there are various settings because, again, there are various sketches in a variety show. They did Mama's Family from the South. They did something called Max and Madam, which was based on California, Hollywood particularly. So there was quite a bit of variation in the setting at the Carol Burnett show. So let's come back then and look at the language. All right, now you knew I had to come to this. What a shock it was to hear that language. Maybe not. In Friends, this was in 1994 to 2004. They could say quite a bit on TV. There were very few things you could not say on network television. Now, Friends aired at 7 o'clock, I think, in the evening, so they still had to be a little careful and they had to tread lightly, but they still came in with some very risque material. So we have quite a bit of opportunity here. Then we come to the language that was used, or the topics that were used, or how things evolved in West Wing. Okay, we have a drama here. This is a very serious show. It's about the White House. It's about the presidency, and it's about the ins and outs of politics and Congress and all of this. Very serious stuff. But sometimes you have to bring the silliness down. You have to bring it in. You have to show it so that the serious does not overwhelm the show, which is what West Wing did brilliantly in several of its seasons. You might have some moments that were very frightening and very scary, and somebody would come in with a joke. Okay? It was a relief of the seriousness. Of course, in Friends, you're expecting this. You're expecting nonstop humor. In West Wing, you don't. So it's a surprise, and it's a relief to the audience. Again, you could use this in terms of a creative writing paper. How important is the silliness in a drama? And of course, then we come to Carol Burnett, and I want to go back to the idea of language. The language used, particularly at the very end when Vicki Lawrence calls Tim Conway a little bit of a name, that language was not allowed on television in that time. There was no cable TV. It was networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC, and that language was not allowed. So the first thing you need to know is that's an outtake. That never made it on the air. That was absolutely censored, okay? Absolutely censored. Would not have ever made it. So even though we find it funny and almost, expected to hear those types of languages these days and those types of subject matters, it doesn't matter, because in 1967 to 1978, we didn't hear that on the air. So let's go back and look then. Remember the things that I've told you, the things that we would have expected, the things that we would know about television, the things that we looked up, such as when it was on the air. Now think to yourself, and I've already got the answers on the board, think to yourself, what was the historical event or occurrence that happened while these shows were on the air? Well, let's take a look. For Friends and for West Wing, the most notable historical event that we would have witnessed would have been 9/11, the terror attacks in September. Now, I want to explain something to you. But first I want to talk to you about Carol Burnett. Carol Burnett was aired during the Vietnam War. Okay, not the whole thing, because it was on for 12 years. But Vietnam was occurring during parts of the Carol Burnett show. So the country was at war when that show was on the air. So let's go look. So we have 9/11 for Friends and West Wing. But those of you who ever watched Friends or who watched West Wing will remember that those historical events were not brought into the television. They were not written into the program. Let's talk about Friends first. Friends is set in New York City. Okay? How do you write a program based in New York City after the September 11th terror attacks? It's difficult, right? Because you have all of this drama and all this sadness and all this fear and all of this rebuilding and everything that has to happen, and you're running a television show that's based in the same city. Well, the writers of Friends knew that they could not bring in that current event to the television program. So if you were thinking about writing something, first of all in a history class, about how television handles major events and how it has handled it over the years, this would be something interesting to talk about. You could write about the fact in a sociology class of how art works in terms of culture. So look at this. We have 9/11 on Friends. They never brought it up. They never talked about it. However, after watching the series for those 3 years after 9/11, and particularly the year of September 11th, I started to notice that many of the characters wore things like New York City Fire Department t-shirts and things that supported those who were going through such grief at that time. So in a way, Friends did support and they did stand up for New York City, but they did it in the only way that they could do without breaking the storyline of the show. All right, but what about West Wing? Set in Washington, D.C. Obviously, Washington, D.C. very much affected by 9/11. However, think about something kind of important. If we bring in 9/11 into West Wing, first of all, we've now brought us into modern time. The show has no real time frame. It's supposed to reflect any presidency and any West Wing group of staffers. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that it would have changed all of the story. So again, the folks from West Wing could not bring in the events of 9/11 into the program. However, the writer Aaron Sorkin decided that he was going to write an episode specifically devoted to terrorism and bring the characters of West Wing in as those characters to discuss it. So what he did was he wrote a show called Isaac and Ishmael, and it was aired, I believe it was the first program aired for West Wing for that year. During the show, they had banners up where you could call and donate money. Before the show, the characters, the actors themselves came out and they talked about it a little bit. But the show itself was as if you were watching West Wing, only it was about terrorism. And the show won awards, and it is brilliant. If you ever get a chance to watch Isaac and Ishmael, I strongly encourage you to do that. But that is how the writers and the staff at West Wing handled 9/11. Okay, they took it outside of the storyline, wrote a play about it, performed it, and then moved back into their storyline as if nothing had happened. But what about Carol Burnett? The Vietnam War was never mentioned on Carol Burnett. It was never in a sketch. It was never examined as we do now with wars and things of that nature, you know, catastrophic events. It was never examined on television. It was never discussed. So you might want to wonder, was it controlled by the network? Was it controlled by the government? Could you look in a political science class and wonder why Vietnam was never discussed on any programs? That would be an interesting paper. So you could see comparison and contrast might bring you to some new ideas, to some things you could talk about, some things that are similar, some things that are different, and you can see how it might apply to several different classes. Okay, comparison and contrast is a wonderful rhetorical mode, and I really strongly encourage you to use it. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so let's give the camera a moment. I'm a little fuzzy. I want you to know that there's something else that you need to decide about when it comes to comparison and contrast. And that is, how will you write your essay? Once you've done all that preliminary work, and once you've decided what you're writing about, depending on the class and the thesis statement, you'll need to make a decision. Is it point by point or subject by subject? I want you to look at this breakdown. Point A might be the characters. Your first subject is Friends, your second is West Wing, your third is Carol Burnett. Your point B might be about the writing. Again, Friends, West Wing, Carol Burnett. Your point C might be current events. Again, Friends, West Wing, and Carol Burnett. I want you to notice that my subjects stay in order under my points. It's very important not to vary it, because this will allow a pattern to establish for the reader so that the reader can understand exactly what it is you're trying to prove. That's point by point. Let's take a look at subject by subject. We see subject 1, Friends. And under Friends, you see that I've written point A, characters, point B, writing, point C, current events. Subject 2 is West Wing. Point A, characters, point B, writing, point C, current events. And then we see the Carol Burnett show as subject 3. Point A, characters, point B, writing, and point C, current events. Notice again that my points stay in the same order under each subject. It's very important. Remember the idea of organization and making sure that the reader knows where they're at. But there's something else important about this besides just keeping your reader on track, and that's keeping you on track. Make sure that if you're going to write something about characters for Friends, that you have something to say about the characters for West Wing and Carol Burnett. If you talk about current events for Friends, don't leave out West Wing, don't leave out Carol Burnett. Make sure that your points stay even. So, good luck writing your comparison contrast essay.